Welcome to the Go Slow to Go Fast Lifestyle Podcast, where we explore how slowing down creates stronger leadership, better health, and a more intentional life. Today's conversation is beautiful and organic as my guest, Veronique Ori, an intuitive movement and mindfulness awareness guide, international retreat leader, and author of Shine On and Off the Mat. In this episode, we talk about what it really means to reconnect with yourself, especially in different seasons of life, work, parenthood, responsibility, and growth. If you've ever been craving a deeper alignment between how you lead or how you move through the world and live, I hope you agree that this conversation meets you right where you are, because you're where you need to be. And hopefully you take away a message that will help you move into the next part of your week and year the way you want to live your life, with a little more confidence to go slow to go fast. So let's dive in. So I'm so excited you've decided to sit down and discuss your journey in the wellness space. But before we get started, and I know you're an expert on this, I just can't wait to hear what you're doing these days to go slow to go fast.
It's so wild, right, to be an expert in something, because in the human experience, we can know about something, we can live it, we can teach it, we can be a guide and encourage. And then also there's the important piece of sometimes life does its life thing and we can go off road a little bit. And so I just wanted to humanize that a little bit, that I haven't arrived to any level of perfection in the slowing down space at all.
Sure. Yeah.
And
that's what makes you more approachable. So that's good. Even the ones who, the practitioners who do this for a living are still going to have their challenges. So I think that's, part of the reason why I asked, what are you working on? Maybe do you have a new strategy you're trying, or just like an ongoing thing that you're working on?
Yeah. What has really helped me is actually intentionally letting go of things on my to-do list. And part of that has been an ever-evolving looking at what lens do I want to be seeing through, experiencing through, and is this task bringing me closer to that, or is there a perception towards how I'm navigating being in this chapter? Is it on the other side of these things? Will I be able to have that spaciousness, or am I caught into a daily rhythm that is almost in this overly type A, OCD, perfectionism, all of that balled in together as pride kind of way of being, which definitely is very deeply embedded in some of my earliest memories, is watching my mom make to-do lists and crossing it off. And even as a teenager, I would write, sleepover with Sarah and Liza. And then I would I did that, there was a satisfaction around, whatever my version of a to-do list was at 13 years old or whatnot. And certainly those early imprints, they stay with us for a long time. And a lot of the slowing down practice is just even having the awareness that we are in a sprint season, or that we're actually overtaxed. But I used to say when I was living in New York, I'm in stride. I would boast that I'm in the marathon of my life. And no, it's just I'm in stride. And so I'm used to doing these things at this pace. And because I was maintaining that pace, the metaphor is only when you slow down do you realize how exhausted that you are. Historically, that's when we get sick. That's when disease shows up. And then we're forced to slow down. And so a lot of this is actually, how do I slow down by design rather than default? And a lot of that is just actually cultivating that space to be able to take note of, okay, where is the busyness and where are these self-made urgencies that actually don't have to exist in my life anymore, and claiming that and reclaiming that as an act of self-love, certainly, and then also how we can each be of service more powerfully with so much more potency when we let go of the things that are heavy. And that's when we can get into that regenerative kind of being with what it is that we're doing with our family, with our work, and whatever the attentions are to just the home task. And so one of the things that I really recommend, and I am saying this also through the lens of being a theater kid, was definitely for many, many years more likely still awake at 5 a.m. than waking up. And I would think, oh my gosh, who is waking up at this hour after, I'd be at a diner drinking black coffee until the sun is coming up, thinking, oh, that's so interesting that people are just waking up now. How strange. I'm going to bed. And then in this last chapter, I have really shifted that. And it's so wild. And it's only when we make these changes and we realize, oh, this is actually so much more regulating. And I feel like that's said so much in the wellness space. What does it mean to be regulated? And I think only when we slow down enough to have the space to cultivate that awareness, to be awake to our senses, to our connection to spirit, what our beliefs are, to be awake to how do I feel in my body? How do I wish to feel? How would I cultivate this dream day? A lot of these things are actually elusive because we're on the gerbil wheel for many of us, and we don't even have the space to slow down for a moment to even ponder what would I do with extra time, with extra money. And so it's definitely a revolution to slow down on purpose and take note. And it's actually very vulnerable. A lot of my clients, they say they actually don't want to. They don't want to have meals by themselves. They don't want to cultivate stillness and silence. It requires a lot of courage. And of course, we can't have courage without vulnerability. But however, it's so empowering when we do create that space, and then we can get really intimate with our deep souls, knowing and desire. And there's so much pleasure to be had in those spaces where we can shift away from this being a loneliness kind of practice, or it can bring up a lot of loneliness and sadness for a lot of us. But through that, there's so much solace in the solitude.
Yeah. And so knowing that you are really being mindful about letting go of things that no longer serve you or maybe just make you feel more of that hustle culture, can you kind of walk everybody through where you started in that shift? Where did it begin for you?
Wow. Probably it really sank in 19. There was a pretty major hurricane that came through, Hurricane Dorian, and it was the first hurricane that I had experienced after moving to Florida. And it was my first hurricane after being a new homeowner. And all I knew to do was to board up the house, bring the potted plants in, watch the news. And so I was basically with no natural light, all the potted plants in the home, and just watching the news. And I created so much turmoil in my stomach that I arrived into the emergency room because there was so much inflammation in my stomach that I thought that, well, this is crazy. I've definitely been more stressed out in my life, but it definitely was a straw breaking moment for me where it was like all of these things that I just kind of tucked away in my tissues and these places that I didn't even realize. It all culminated in this moment where I was, everything shut down. We're holed up in the house and it's just media and all we can know is we might lose everything, but we don't know. And so what's so wild about that is, ultimately everything is unknown, but when we get so caught up in what if this and, these worst case scenarios, and it's this cocktail of worry and anxiety and fear all swirled together with like a perfect big square ice cube, and like maybe like a fancy garnish that you're just slowly drinking, and it's basically poison of your own design. And we do that in sneaky ways. It doesn't have to be a hurricane. We do that in relationships that have some kind of toxicity or a work dynamic that is feeling like it's just ripping you apart. But we stay because we're addicted to the known, even though it's causing a cancer, so to speak, in the body. And so that was a really big wake up call for me. And that was sort of just before COVID, where everything shut down. And then we were in this like major era of unknown, and talk about feeling so anxious and fearful of, will we ever be able to hug our loved ones again? Will I ever be able to cross the Canada border and see my family again? And, all of these what ifs. And it became very clear to me that there needs to be practices that we can do from wherever we are, whether we're in community or not. And how about we stop waiting for circumstance to be just so in order to cultivate our own peace? And so those were initial seeds of that letting go practice. And that definitely has carried through this last 6-year season.
So had you always been practicing yoga, or did you shift into that practice after moving to Florida as well?
So oddly enough, and probably not a coincidence, during Hurricane Sandy, when I was living in New York City, it's so wild how hurricanes are following me somehow. And probably other people have, stories of some kind of natural disaster or maybe an emotional disaster of sorts, how it can catapult these changes and shifts in our trajectory. We can think of these as sliding doors moments of, here I was on this path, and then this thing happened, and I just kind of jumped the rails and took this other track. And that was definitely one of those, but it was a slow transition that came in different waves. And that was one where everything shut down in New York City, which, if you know any major city, for the subway to shut down, it's a really big deal. And it shut down for a couple of days, I believe. And my roommate at the time, we were holed up in the apartment and we were just going stir crazy. And at that time, I was burning the candle at both ends. I had a nonprofit theater company that I'd been running, and I was doing marketing and PR for different independent theater. And I was bopping around, sleeping very little, just eating dollar slice of pizza on the road.
Which you can in New York City very easily.
But you can,
so yes.
And feel like, this is like really energizing. And then it would turn, and then all of a sudden you're just exhausted and annoyed and just like, get out of my way, very quickly. And so I would say, after I started my yoga practice, that I practiced for the safety of others, because it can be very triggering living in a city where it just feels like everyone's in your way all of the time, and you can't ever go fast enough, which is
Yeah.
also according to whom, right?
Right.
So anyway,
Yes.
rewind to my roommate apparently had been going to this yoga studio in town, and he said, "Oh, I heard that they opened back up. Do you want to go to this class?" And he basically could have said anything. And I just went. I had gone to maybe a couple yoga classes when I lived in LA, but it didn't take. I thought, well, I'll just go. And it changed my life. The teacher was so welcoming, and the class was a 60-minute vinyasa style class. And then it was 30 minutes of restorative. And she was really adept at bringing in storytelling. And I remember she would make really beautiful metaphors and give us mind meals to think about while we were stretching. And after the class, I went to the front desk and I said, I'm signing up for, a monthly unlimited. I'm going to come all of my days. I want to feel like this the rest of my days. And I just couldn't believe that there was something where I could connect this like physical, like I knew I had this like physical desire to move energy that could also be creative, that could also give this thought provoking mind meal something. So it really felt like it connected all of these pieces of me that I was interested in and that I leaned into and felt really inspired by. And I also was very novice. I definitely likened myself to sort of a baby giraffe in the space. I wasn't a dancer or a gymnast. The physical practice was very challenging for me. And I thought for many years, this is really intimidating, but I'll just show up and I feel good. So I'll just, continue to be as I am. And luckily I had teachers who saw something in me, and little by little shifts started to happen. And then it became really empowering of, wow, if I'm telling myself that I can't do this physical shape, where in my life am I telling myself that I can't do something? And if I'm wrong about the physical shape and the yoga practice, then I'm probably wrong about this thing in my real life. And so it really helped sort of take the blinders off of limiting beliefs and feeling like, oh, I don't want to try something because what if I fail? That I think is really prevalent as adults of we just want to do the things that we're good at, that we feel like we're an expert at because it feels embarrassing or vulnerable to do something that we're not good at, even though at one point we all were beginners at
Mhm.
whatever the thing is. That's been a really beautiful practice to come into beginner's mind as often as possible and to remember that we can glean so much by letting go of needing to know everything.
Mhm.
And so that was how it first began in terms of the physical practice, and then years and years and years of being in the physical practice, then it was, fellow practitioners and friends would say, you should teach. And I said, no, I really enjoy this.
Yeah.
I just want to come and I want to practice. And then, as the years went on, there were just really perfect alignments where it just felt like I was being guided in that way. And it was very natural, and it evolved over many years, which really it continues to evolve, which has been just such a treasure to be a part of.
Yeah, I think, like you said, there are moments in our life where sometimes we just are kind of pushed into having to look for something new that's going to help us feel better, or we're going to have some sort of crisis or change, we're going to have to make a shift for whatever reason, but it's good to hear that you found something that worked for you and then you kept going back, which I think some people might have a transformative experience and then not know what to do next. So, you didn't expect it to make a change like that, but you did feel something. And so that says a lot. That's great. I think it does depend on the teacher too, though. I agree.
It does. Yeah, I love sharing that story because actually when I don't know if this was the first yoga class I went to in my 20s in LA, but maybe one of the first, if not the first. A friend brought me there and I thought I did okay. I think it was an intermediate class that I just, the time and the day worked. And so I just showed up and I did my best. The teacher came up to me afterwards and he said, "Oh, the beginner class is actually at a different time." And I was so embarrassed that I never went back. And what's so wild about that is, going back to what I was saying, why should I be embarrassed? I was a beginner.
Right.
And he was probably just being helpful, like
Sure.
you could learn the foundational shapes in this other class,
Mm,
but I took it as he didn't think I was good enough. And then I interpreted, "Oh, I'm not welcome here."
mm-hmm. I hear you. Yeah.
Like the 24 or whatever year old version of
Yeah.
me felt like, "Oh, I'm not gonna like show up
Yeah.
again because
Yeah.
I feel, you know, called out."
Yeah.
And and so probably almost 10 years later was the class that
When you
brought
tried
me
again.
in, and
Okay.
the teacher was very welcoming. I think what's so important, and because I meet people all the time that say, "I tried yoga once, it's not for me." And it's
Yep.
like food, dating.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so many
Mm-hmm.
different
Yeah.
lineages, there's so many different teachers and voices, and also we're different every time we show up. And so I always feel like, what are you wanting? And I believe that there's a teacher, there's a style that can connect to everyone. And it's just a matter of finding that connection. So it's not, yoga isn't right for like
Right.
these particular people, but it was that combination of that teacher and that style and where they were at the time that
Yeah.
didn't resonate for some reason. So I do want to encourage everyone to continue to Because really it is about finding a way that feels like union to you. So that could be some kind of peacefulness practice, or it could be some kind of somatic practice where you feel grounded and you feel uplifted. You feel light, but you also feel strong, that you can move through the heaviness of whatever the things that you're navigating, and you have an anchor that can help you through. So it could be meditation, it could be a physical practice, it could be a philosophical practice. There's so many different entry points into it. And so it feels like this call to lean in and find the thing that actually resonates.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm thinking kind of, I've had a lot of thoughts come through my mind as you were speaking. Like, I just have this vision of Carrie Bradshaw in Sex and the City and kind of like her reaction to whatever exercise class they were in with friends at the time, But, if you're not in the right place or the right mindset, then like you said, just try again. It can
Yeah.
be, years later, or it could be the next week and a different instructor. Just keep trying to find what works for you. And, it may not be goat yoga, but, maybe
But it might be.
vinyasa. It
Yeah.
might be. We don't know.
I
Or
know.
hot yoga. I guess that's what she was doing at the time. I was thinking about it. She was doing hot yoga. I mean, I think some of those classes, they try to make them more accessible to different types of people. I get it. But
Yeah.
I'm not going to
Yeah.
hot yoga anytime soon because I already have my own, inner heat wave
Inner
going on.
heat.
I
Yeah.
don't need that.
Yeah. But I mean, it's proof positive that our desires change over time, because I used to think, why would I go into a room? Actually, I have a very strong memory of living in LA and going into a hot studio to talk to them about it. And it was one of those small studios where the front desk was also inside of the studio. And I think I got one question out, and I was so overwhelmed by the heat. I said, you know what? Do you mind if we step outside to finish this conversation? Because
Yeah, I can imagine.
I can't concentrate when I'm trying to have a conversation in 106-degree heat, which is humid, the kind of heat. But anyway, fast forward to probably a decade or so later, I started going to a hot class because it was the only vinyasa option where I had moved to. Truth be told, the first handful of classes, I was dead.
Can
Sea
imagine.
legs, unable to walk
Yeah.
afterwards for a good 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But I started to cultivate a resiliency, and then it became, that was my preference
Mm,
for that season of time. Where
hmm
I think there's moments where, for me, I need to burn things off. Like maybe
hmm
there's like emotional stuff that I'm moving through where I actually feel like I want to leave this all, like wring it out of my
Yeah.
body kind of feeling. And then
hmm
there have definitely been many moments since I moved down to Florida where I just want to lay down on I
And the
call it
corpse pose is great.
yeah. Yeah, like, I call it my snug rug. It's like a shag rug, and it's
Yeah.
super cozy, and I just wanna stretch with my dog and listen to French music and not
No.
do very much. But,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like the inner seasons, the exterior seasons, like, all of these things play
hmm
apart, and only, right, when we slow
hmm
down can we actually be aware of what that is, so that we're not
Yeah.
doing things habitually. People get like annoyed in the winter, like, oh, I don't have as much energy to do this really strong practice. It's like,
It's
great,
okay.
you're on schedule. We are meant to be hibernating. We're
True.
actually meant to be in a soft season, an introspective season. Be still
hmm Yeah.
until you need to shake it out, and then you'll find that energy shows up organically. But don't force it just because that was what you were doing all summer long or something.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, exercise can change with you depending on the phase and season you're in, which is great. And yoga is one of those that can move with you, literally and figuratively. Um, I'm also thinking about listeners out there who are in their, 60s, 70s, who might think, I used to do yoga, but I just don't think I can do that anymore because of maybe surgery they've had on their back, or their arthritis is so bad, or, their range of movement is different now. But I think, if you find the right teacher, they will know,
Absolutely.
right, how to adjust for you and give you options to think about poses differently.
Absolutely. I live in a snowbird town. Actually, the average age, I think, is 65. Before COVID, and I was teaching all of the studios and centers. I taught at a neighborhood. They had, a fitness room area, and my eldest student was 93 years old. And granted, the practices that I was offering for her was different than maybe someone younger. However, we're still connecting to the breath. We're still connecting to movement in some regard, connecting mobility, functional range of motion, balance, all of these things. And so it really does require connecting to a teacher that understands that and can meet you where you are. And so oftentimes, certainly in this era, I'm teaching privately or semi privately. These are curated offerings that are based on exactly who is there versus something that is for more of a general all levels audience, because oftentimes just like a one size fits all dress or shirt, it's not necessarily going to fit every person.
Right.
Just like an all levels class isn't really going to fit every person. It might be a swatch. It might be like, okay, well, we moved and we were together and this was like a nice social gathering. But more and more, I think if someone listening is wanting something that is tailored to, for example, I just had hip surgery or I have arthritis or some kind of specific something that's going on, or maybe I used to go to yoga classes and I haven't gone in 10 years or whatever the case may be, that you connect with someone. And I mean, the beauty of this day and age is it can be a teacher from anywhere in the world. In fact, most of my clients I teach virtually. So it's been an era where I would have never thought, before COVID that would be the model of teaching yoga, because before it was, oh no, this is an in-person offering and that's how it is. And then I thought 100% that when the studios opened back up, that everyone would go back and everyone stayed. Every single person stayed. They said, I prefer it this way because they have the privacy of being in their own home. They can use, their comfy blanket or pillows, whatever they have. Sometimes we'll creatively, say, sit down on the couch and then use this pillow in this way. And so then you're habituated to create these different things in your home so that
Mhm.
you don't need me all the time.
Mhm.
Although all my clients say they would never do it if they didn't have the appointment with me. But if you're
Yeah.
making your tea or you have these in between moments, there's a great way to add little stretches while we're in these in between moments that can be really helpful and just reducing inflammation, of just feeling good in the body, feeling energetic, feeling like you're practicing balance. I have a lot of clients that are in the Northeast. They're talking about, fear of walking on ice because what if they fall and break a hip or, break their wrist or what have you. And so it's so important that we find 2 feet on the ground, that we're habituated to, if there is a change in balance, that we have more of that agility. And so that it takes practice. And so in this very sedentary culture, it's probably the biggest calling these days is how can we cultivate times where it's like, okay, like I could, for example, listen to this podcast seated, or I could take it on a walk, or while I listen, I could lay down and I could stretch. I could connect to my breath. And that's a really great way to be learning and also tending to your body at the same time.
Yeah, that's a very good point. There's probably many different clients that you're interfacing with different needs. And so it's nice that you can do that through the virtual space. Do you have offerings that are not live, but like a video based, I guess?
Yeah. So what happened with COVID, I had been getting requests to write my Dharma talks down. So I started to write my book, which is now published. It's called Shine On and Off the Mat. And with the stories, there's an interactive piece to it where there's a video series. So there's 3 parts that are connected to a weekly theme, which is timely and timeless. So, for example, the first theme is let go, the second theme is slow down, right? So, these things
Nice.
that we'll be practicing for all of our days. And just like the yoga class or the teacher, whatever it is, it lands with us differently depending on where we are. That's how these themes can continue to be a daily, monthly, annual practice, because depending on where you are, that theme will resonate in a different way. And so the 3 videos, there's a guided meditation, there's a vinyasa style, so breath with movement practice, and then there's a yin stretch practice, so lying down, seated, gentle with blankets and pillows and things. And so the invitation is to take that mind meal, or, for example, you're starting from the beginning, the theme is let go. And so in the meditation and the movement and the stretching, you can be in that pondering of what feels most at the surface, or maybe what feels most buried that wants to come to the surface of your present let go practice, which we can all think about where we were in these different cycles, whether you're tracing through, what's really fun to do. I don't know when you're listening to this, but if you're kind of close to the year of the horse starting, you could go back 12 years and trace, okay, what was I letting go in the last year of the snake? And then you could go back 12 years and 12 years, and you could start to pick up on some themes. And what's so powerful about doing that is you can start to really identify what is repeating and what do I absolutely I'm so done with repeating this, And so sometimes we have to do it a lot before we just kind of
Before we get it.
want to hit ourselves lovingly and be like, okay, okay, enough, So that's part of the invitation is to move through it with the interactive piece. And then I used to get a lot of feedback that people really love my music playlists. And so all of my music playlists are on there. There's journal prompts. So if you feel called to write down, there's a lot of power pen to paper to write down, okay, I am letting go of, and you pronounce it. There's actually a lot of science to back that you really activate that in the written word. It doesn't have to be, a manuscript.
Right.
It could be a few words. But when you are connected to that actually really creates some beautiful forward movement. And so that's through my Shine membership. And so what's beautiful is, and you can find out about it on my website, yogawithveronique.com. And there's a really sweet question. So what I love is this idea that, depending on how our heart is in the moment. So that's the prompt, is how is your heart? And there's a few questions that will guide you through how do you want to create this practice space for yourself. And so once you answer those few questions, then it will curate the perfect video for you in the moment, the music playlist, and the journal prompt. And you can do it solo, or you can invite your loved ones to join in a virtual community, or certainly if you have people where you live that want to join in person. But I find, if you have some of your favorite people in different countries and states, it's a really beautiful way to connect, beyond social media, beyond the texting, how's it going? But let's just hop on a little video call, or if you prefer to be video off, and you could just know that you're moving through this practice in community. There's actually really great power in moving through. And then you can share what's so powerful about sharing this practice of, say, letting go, or in what part of your life do you want to slow down? Then we realize, oh, okay, the way that you are wanting this is the way that I'm wanting this. It's just through a different lens, through different circumstance. But that really helps just let go of this idea that we're alone. Sometimes when we're moving through things and it feels hard to start something, it can be immobilizing. So I love the on-demand option, because you could randomly, at 2:39 p.m. on a Thursday, think, oh, I actually have 20 minutes to do a practice right now. And you could just hit play, move through the practice, and then 100% like you'll feel better. 20-minute pocket is just the perfect amount of time to really be in a deeper regulation of your nervous system.
Yeah, I love that you're offering those resources. So at any time you can tap in and kind of reset, let go, whatever you're working on. So that's great to know. So is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners and viewers before our time is up?
I think right now it feels like being in the questioning of what feels like the quality that you wish to embody and share the very most, and then where, who, and what, right? So, like the place, the people, and the practice. How are you aligning yourself to be in the embodiment and the sharing of that? Where there isn't that judgment or comparison or expectation, but just from that space of love, how are you navigating that? And that's a lot to ponder, but I think it's a really worthwhile exercise to sit with. If you want to take it on a walk, to be kind of chewing on that as you walk, or if you want to take a sit with some tea and just really reflect on that, because I think the more each of us attune in that way, that causes a really beautiful ripple effect into the world.
Yeah, and that resonates because after I interview different friends for the Go Slow to Go Fast podcast, I really like to sit and reflect after and just kind of unwind. And so I'm going to do that after this one because I think it would be great. And like you said, I do believe we send out that positivity into the world and all spaces and timelines.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So we've unpacked a lot, and I'll make sure everything as far as your website and your book and ways to get in touch with you to learn more about your work in the world is in our show notes. But if you wanted to just share all those places verbally, we can make sure people hear that as well.
Absolutely. My website is yogawithveronique.com. I'm on Instagram at Veronique Ori. And what is really exciting coming up this year is I also have a couple retreats. So this is open to anyone who's a curious seeker. You don't have to be an advanced yoga practitioner. This isn't, we're doing yoga all day, every day. This is you could think of it as wellness travel. So I have a really great workshop immersion at the Omega Institute, May 31st to June 5th this year. And then also with my partner, Erin Lanahan Kolenda, we lead a retreat annually through our company V Retreat. And that will be in Italy this year on the East Coast at a really beautiful estate called Olivito Estate. And it'll be really amazing food and great practices and cultural immersion. So if you're wanting something to connect in that way, that'll be October 24th to the 1st of this year as well. Other than that, I really hope that everyone feels encouraged to reach out. I always say, message me if anything resonates, if you have any questions. I think it's very common to listen or to scroll, and it's less common for people to engage. And so I really want to inspire people to engage, because when we are an active participant in our lives, we can invoke great change for ourselves and for others. So I encourage you to reach out, and I would love to hear from each of you.
And I think, the more we can build that community of like-minded humans who are out there supporting each other, the better the world's going to be. So thank you for the work that you do and offering those options for people to interact in that community. Well, thank you for coming on the show. It's been a great conversation. And again, I'll make sure all ways to connect with you will be available for listeners and viewers out there for, as many times they want to come back and listen to your voice and figure out ways to reset and let go.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just have to say that I really enjoyed my conversation with Veronique, and it was not only grounding, but expansive. And she just reminds us that shining isn't about doing more. It's about remembering who we already are and who we want to be. So through movement, reflection, and honest self-inquiry, we create space to lead, live, and love from a place of alignment instead of exhaustion. If today's episode resonated with you, I encourage you to explore Veronique's work, her retreats, and her book, Shine On and Off the Mat. Her approach is a beautiful reminder that mindfulness isn't separate from who we are, who we show up to be every day. It strengthens us to be our best version of ourselves. And as always, if this conversation supported you, I hope that you'll consider sharing it with a friend or two who needs a little balancing in their leadership, family, or well-being, or all three. Screenshot the episode, tag us on your social media pages, and let us know your biggest takeaway. Until next time, the leader in me honors the leader in you. And as you head into the rest of your week, remember to let your light shine through. Go slow to go fast, and thanks for listening.